Anarchy series. So we're back at it again with another episode. I'm using a different service now, Restream. I just, was searching things up and found this one. I heard the news of what's going on with Streamlabs, and I was just like, oof, that's a bad look, oof. So went ahead and quickly found another one. I'm gonna check on YouTube to make sure everything looks good before I get started. Let's see here. But if you all recall, on the last section, we talked about um, with the economy. And what was the title of the last section? Let's see. Yeah, without wages, what is the incentive to work? Oh, that was such a great chapter right there. Great section, rather. Going into the fact that people work regardless of, wages, um, and how they point out that uh, the very inclusion, or the reason why people want to work for money is not because they want money in of itself. Is because we need money today to support most aspects of our lives, pretty much all of our lives, versus in communities where all your needs are met by simply being in the community, right? It's basically free living. And people say, oh, that's unsustainable, that's unrealistic, but that's how humans have lived for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, right? And the only reason why that changed was not because it was unsustainable, because we have to remember it's only been recently where we've had billions of humans on this planet, right? Versus when people had began to transfer away from, self-sustainable cultures for the last couple thousand years, right? Ever since the creation of agriculture and the ability to create power structures, right? That's when you started seeing a separation between people who are able to have their entire lives fulfilled by just being in a community versus folks who had to pay for certain, access to certain resources because there were people who had the power to divvy out those resources. Um, but yeah, we can have like plenty of communities today, similar to like your family, right? If you have a healthy family, at least, like I've been raised in a big family, and you don't necessarily worry about like what you're going to eat because somebody's going to cook, right? Whether it's, me or mom or dad or one of my brothers, somebody's going to cook, right? And you're going to get some food. Even though we're not rich at all. We've been impoverished my entire life, but you know, there was usually something to eat. It was only the roughest of times when we had to go without food. Granted, it wasn't always the best like food. It was mostly staples like chicken and rice, but we knew we was always going to eat. You know, I don't have to pay a certain amount of money in order for me to get dinner or breakfast or whatever, right? Same thing for a community, right? Imagine the entire community is your family, right? You know somebody's going to cook or some people are going to cook and you can all come together to eat and things like that, right? And that means that you have a natural separation of, or rather natural specialization, right? We love specialization in today's time. Um, I'm going too far. Let me check, make sure this audio is even okay. I'm all good. I'm all good. I had to make sure it was the audio was in there. But anyways, yeah, like we love specialization, and when you have a community setting where everybody can pitch in however they want to pitch in, how they can pitch in, then you have natural specialization, and also a balance with generalization, because this is the other side of the problem, right? We it's so weird. Our society today has like the two extremes. We have way too much specialization, but also way too much generalization in other ways. And how that makes sense is, I mean, what that means is, in some ways, we have too much specialization, right? Whereas where people do one thing, and they go full down that path and they don't really interact with anybody else or anything else. You see this a lot in like science, for instance. And I've been learning about this as I've been reading Hegel. And he's been talking about how science should, kind of, you should demand more from science as an ability to explain everything in the world, right? But today, we have this over specialization in science and many other fields where you have experts in one extremely specific area, and they rarely ever interact with other people in other areas. And what that does, it creates unrealistic um, or just theoretical science or theoretical applications of things where as soon as put that thing in the real world, it kind of falls apart, or it doesn't fully explain things, because the real world is too complex. Everything is interrelated, interconnected. On the other end, we have overgeneralization, meaning that we have this idea that a single unit family, right? The nuclear family is sufficient to raise a child, when we know that not to be true, right? Despite the fact that you have the old saying, takes a village to raise a child, that's almost literal, because for most of human history, it literally took the village to raise any of the children, because the children did not just learn from the parents, they learned from all the elders within the village, right? To give them a good enough information of things, and they were raised with other children from other family units, allowing them to have a better sense of cohesion, a better sense of independence, healthier sense of interdependence, this, that, and the other, right? We see this all the time. So our society is both way too general, right, way too generalized, and way too specialized. I think building these types of communities strikes a good balance, right, and puts those in the right way. But anyways, let's get into it. Let me drink some water first. Stay hydrated. I got to fill up. I probably should have filled up before I started, but we in it now. Don't people need bosses and experts? How can anarchists organize themselves in the workplace and coordinate production and distribution across an entire economy without bosses and managers? In fact, a great deal of resources are lost through competition and middlemen. Yep. Ultimately, it is the workers who carry out all the production and distribution, and they know how to coordinate their own work in the absence of bosses. In and around Turin, Italy, 500,000 workers participated in a factory takeover movement after World War I. Communists, anarchists, and other workers who were pissed off at their exploitation launched wildcat strikes, many of them eventually gaining control of their factories and setting up factory councils to coordinate their activities. Oh, excuse me. They were able to run the factories themselves without bosses. Eventually, the councils were legalized and legislated out of existence, in part co opted and absorbed into the labor unions, whose institutional existence was threatened by autonomous workers' power no less than the owners were. Ain't that something interesting? The unions, themselves kind of taking apart the entire, like, are kind of against actual unionization of labor. That's kind of interesting there, right? This goes to show hierarchies of power in almost any structure, no matter if you call it left or right, is still a problem, right? It's not the left or the right that's a problem. It's the fact that you have a structure of power, period. Anyways, in December 2001, a long brewing economic crisis in Argentina matured into a run on the banks, which precipitated a major popular rebellion. Argentina had been the poster child of neoliberal institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, but the policies that enriched foreign investors and gave middle class Argentinians a first world lifestyle created an acute poverty for much of the country. Anti capitalist resistance was already widely developed among the unemployed. And after the middle class lost savings, millions of people took to the streets, rejecting all the false solutions and excuses offered by politicians, economists, and the media, declaring instead, yeah, they almost go. I took Spanish. Let me see if I can. Que se vayan todos. Que se vayan todos. I know the inflections and stuff. They almost go. Dozens were killed by police, but people fought back, shaking off the terror left over from the military dictatorship that ruled Argentina in the 70s and the 80s. Hundreds of factories abandoned by their owners were occupied by workers who resumed production so they could continue to feed their families. The more radical of these worker-occupied factories equalized wages and shared managerial duties among all workers. They made decisions in open meetings, and some workers taught themselves tasks such as accounting to ensure that a new managerial class did not arise. Some factories rotated managerial tasks or required that people in managerial roles still work on the factory floor and perform the accounting, marketing, and other tasks after hours. As of this writing, several of these occupied workplaces have been able to expand the workforce and hire additional workers from Argentina's huge unemployed population. In some cases, occupied factories traded needed supplies and products with one another, creating a shadow economy in the spirit of solidarity. It's so interesting because literally this morning I had a kind of meetup call with some fellow polymaths, and we were talking about organization, right? And some of the things we brought up is the fact that um, kind of managerial duties is very much introduces inefficiencies in your organization and creates basically like empty value, right? Where you claim it's value, creating value, but really what you're doing is just kind of sucking up to the people up top, right? You're trying to make yourself seem appealing to your managers and their bosses and their boss and there and so on, and it creates a huge amount of waste in everything from the value chain to the production. Abilities and things like that. Furthermore, this goes to what I was saying about generalization versus specialization. If you specialize into things like managerial things, what you're actually doing is you're specializing your ability um, to manage, right? To have leadership positions and have leadership skills, right? We like to think that the leaders only leaders have leadership skills, but in reality, everybody has leadership skills in certain areas, right? Some people have leadership skills in one area, some have it in another, right? And we completely just ignore that. We claim that, oh all leaders have these leadership skills, whatever that means. Politicians are good at politics. What we're really saying here is that we're going to take away our ability to think about politics or leadership or managing things or whatever from the masses. We're going to take that away from the masses and make it so that only a small amount of people can actually have this ability to think on that level, which in my mind is completely terrible, right? It's what causes so much um, corruption and really creates so much space for corruption. Because think about it once again, if the average person does not understand how to do things like negotiate, manage risk or other types of or strategy, right? Or make decisions for themselves or make long-term decisions or all these other like if the average person doesn't know how to do this, that is literally power. Because that is how we create. That is what power even means: is making decisions, creating strategy. All these things, like these, are the tools of power. And if we specialize that away, say only these certain people can do that, then what that means is that the average person does not have that ability. And we see this today with simple things like the grocery store. The fact that here in America, in many Western places, we have a grocery store with the sticker price and there's no negotiation. Versus if you go to a marketplace or like rather one of those bazaars or something like that in other countries, you have to negotiate. It's a regular thing that people do. And because of that, in America, most people don't know how to negotiate. They don't know, not only they're at the grocery store, but they don't know how to negotiate like directions. They don't know how to negotiate salary at a job. They don't know how to negotiate, decisions with their family, this, that, and the other. It's really sad. Um, so certain things should not be specialized. So everything, certain things should be always generalizable, which is things like this. Anyways, one of the most famous one of the most famous, the Zanin ceramics factory located in southern Argentina, was shut down by the owner in 2001 and occupied by its workers the following January. They began running the factory with an open assembly and commissions made up of workers to manage sales, administration, planning, security, hygiene and sanitation, purchasing, production, diffusion, and press. Following the occupation, they rehired workers who had been fired before the closing. As of 2004, they numbered 270 workers and produced at 50% of the production rate before the factory was closed. Bringing doctors and psychologists on site, they provided themselves with health care. The workers found that they could pay their workforce with just 2 days of production. Wow. 2 days. So they lowered prices 60% and organized a network of young vendors, many previously unemployed, to market the ceramic tiles throughout the city. In addition to producing tiles, the Xana factory involves itself with social movements, donating money to hospitals and schools, selling tiles at cost to poor people, hosting films, performances, and art shows, and carrying out solidarity actions with other struggles. They also support the Mapuche, Mapuche struggle for autonomy. And when their clay suppliers stopped doing business with them for political reasons, the Mapuche began supplying clay. As of April 2003, the factory had faced 4 attempted evictions by the police with the support of the trade unions. All were forcefully resisted by the workers, assisted by neighbors, piqueteros, and others. Wow. It works, man. And people like to say, "Oh, it doesn't work. It's gonna fall apart." But oftentimes, it doesn't fall apart. People just have to try to force it to fall apart, right? They try to attack and destroy these organizations. Um, and before you say, "Oh, see that's proof it doesn't work," well, if you go and forcefully attack an Amazon facility, that's gonna fail too. That's gonna bring up all the police to shut down Amazon. Anyways, in July 2001, the workers of the El Tigre supermarket in Rosario, Argentina, occupied their workplace. The owner had shut it down 2 months earlier and declared bankruptcy, still owing his employees months in wages. After fruitless protesting, the workers opened El Tigre and then began running it themselves through an assembly that allowed all workers to part in decision making. In a spirit of solidarity, they lowered prices and began selling fruit and vegetables from a local farmers cooperative and products made in other occupied factories. They also used part of their space to open a cultural center for the neighborhood, housing political talks, student groups, theater and yoga workshops, puppet shows, a cafe, and a library. In 2003, El Tigre's Cultural Center held a national meeting of reclaimed businesses, attended by 1,500 people. Maria, one collective member, said of her experience, 3 years ago, if someone had told me we'd be able to run this place, I'd never have believed them. I believe we needed bosses to tell us what to do. Now I realize that together we can do it better than them. Ain't that the thing? And that's crazy too, because you can just show people, right? And that's the biggest thing. Um, People think that again, if you really think you need bosses in any situation, just see what it's like without them, right? And to make it an honest thing, right? Because sometimes people are already biasing like the experiment where they sabotage the entire thing so that it can't be successful without a boss. Not because you need a boss, but because they literally make it impossible for people to communicate or come together or manage the various ins and outs of the business. You can't run this experiment if you don't actually trust people to run the experiment, to actually do the work and figure it out together, right? So personally, I would love to build more of these types of organizations myself to prove more widely and various types of industries that this can be done and how it can be done and begin building up a modern day kind of example of that. That's something I'm definitely going to shoot towards. Now that I have a salary position, I can save up money for myself, get in my own place, and begin just doing this sort of work because I definitely think it's super important. In Euskal Herria, the Basque country occupied by the states of Spain and France, a large complex of cooperative worker-owned businesses has arisen, centered around the small city of Mondragon. Mondragon or Mondragon? Starting with 23 workers in one cooperative in 1956, the Mondragon cooperative included 19,500 workers in over 100 cooperatives by 1986, surviving despite the heavy recession in Spain at the time and with a survival rate many times better than the average for capitalist firms. Ain't that something? Mondragon has had a rich experience over many years in manufacturing products as varied as furniture, kitchen equipment, machine tools, and electronic components, and in printing, shipbuilding, and metal smelting. Mondragon has created hybrid cooperatives composed of both consumers and workers and of farmers and workers. The complex has developed its own social security cooperative and a cooperative bank that is growing more rapidly than any other bank in the Basque provinces. The Basque provinces. That's pretty cool. The highest authority in the Mondragon cooperatives is the General Assembly, with each worker member getting one vote. The specific management of the cooperative is carried out by an elected governing council, which is advised by a managing council and a social council. There are also many criticisms of the Mondragon complex. To anarchists, it comes as no surprise that a democratic structure can house an elite group. Yeah, and according to Mondragon's critics, this is exactly what has happened as the cooperative complex seeks and achieves success within a capitalist economy. Although their accomplishment is impressive and gives lie to the assumption that large industries must be organized hierarchically, the compulsion to be profitable and competitive has pushed the cooperatives to manage their own exploitation. For example, after decades of sticking by their egalitarian founding principles regarding pay scales, eventually the Mondragon cooperatives decided to increase the salaries of the managerial and technical experts relative to the manual workers. Their reason was that they had a hard time retaining people who could receive much higher pay for their skills in a corporation. This problem indicates a need to mix manual and intellectual tasks to avoid the professionalization of the expertise, i.e., creating expertise as a quality restricted to an elite few. Yeah, I agree. That's why everybody needs to learn some amount of technical skills, right? Not because everybody can be, obviously not everybody can code or this, that, and the other, but everybody can understand these different technical skills. Furthermore, if you focus more on building automated tools to automate certain portions of this and make it easier for any person with some technical aptitude, right, to partake in these types of jobs or skills, versus only having one type of person who can do who does all those technical things, right? You can have a better, I think, like mix of people in the play area. And to build an economy in which people are producing not for profit but for other members of the network, so money loses its importance and people work out of a sense of community and solidarity. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's another problem. This is why I keep saying, like, it seems like this book is saying that you can't have what do you call it? Goodness, capitalism with with any other kind of organizations. It just makes it way more difficult to upkeep those organizations. Not because you can't compete with capitalism, not in that way. It's because capitalism is inherently corrosive, right? It's a natural corruptive material like acid. It's not like you can't compete with acid. It's just that acid is what it does. It goes and melts things, right? That's not at that pH level. Um, and the solution is not to make everything acidic. No, the solution is to have it balanced so that you only use that acid in a specific areas, wherever it's appropriate. Um, or if you want, you can call it a parasite or you can call it a virus. But either way, like, you have to contain capitalism very, very tightly in order for it to be useful, and not overly abusive and affecting everything else. Um, because a huge problem with capitalism is that things like ethical, being ethical and being um, kind of fair, right? Being not profit driven is a liability, right? They say, oh, it's not good for business, meaning being ethical is not good for business. That's the fundamental issue with capitalism. All right, that's something I've been coming to grips with. It's like, I would love to be able to, oh, let's fix capitalism because it's brought us so much. But when I look more into it again, there's this it's very, very, very problematic, right? It's created way more problems than we actually um give it credit for. We should give capitalism credit. If you want to give capitalism credit for all the things it's done, give capitalism credit for all the things it's fucked up. All right. And it's a lot. It's a long, long list. And if we made a cost benefits analysis, I'm sorry, but the cost would almost certainly be way, way bigger than the benefits. Um, anyways, let's continue. People in today's high-tech societies are trained to believe that examples from the past or from the underdeveloped world have no value for our situation today, which is so stupid. Because literally, like, if you don't learn from the history from your past, you're bound to repeat it, as they always say, and we see that all the time. We see that today. We see that almost every industry, every area that we look at, When you don't learn from what happened before, it's just a new iteration of the same problem happens again, because inevitably you have those same situations, you have those same people, you have those same kind of pressures involved, and thus the same problems can come up. Many people who consider themselves educated sociologists and economists dismiss the Mondragon example by classifying Basque culture as exceptional. But there are other examples of the efficacy of egalitarian workplaces, even in the heart of capitalism. And this is another, I hate this too. Like people say, oh, it's not relevant for this or that because of their culture, right? Because it's not the culture. But what is culture, right? Culture is not some magical um inherent essence of a society. Culture is like the DNA or the memory of that society. All it is a example of what that society values and what it has done, what it has historically valued, right? And what changes that culture, right? That means that, first of all, that means that the culture is changeable, right? Because it is a memory, because it is showing you what happened before, it is possible to change the culture. First, you have to realize that. Then you have to realize how to change that culture. You can change it by introducing new things, right? Things that it has that forces that culture, right? That those set of people who make up that culture to do something differently. That means better information, better resources, better organization, better environment, any of these things or all of them, right? Once you introduce these different things, boom, you can mutate the culture. You can change the culture, just like introducing any of these things into a human DNA will mutate the DNA, right? It is so frustrating sometimes that people don't see this. Because again, I'm not that smart. I just read, and you see this when you read into history and all these things. Gore Associates, based in Delaware, is a billion-dollar high-tech firm that produces waterproof Gore-Tex fabric, special insulation for computer cables, and parts for their medical, automobile, and semiconductor industries. Salaries are determined collectively. No one has titles. There is no formal management structure, and differentiation between employees is minimized. By all capitalist standards of performance, employee turnover, profitability, product reputation, lists of best companies to work for, Gore is a success. Never heard of this company. Let's see. Are they still in operation? Yep. Interesting. I'd be interested to see what it's really like working there. Not my cup of tea, but sounds interesting. I like the all this stuff. An important factor in their success is adherence to what some academics call the rule of 150, based on the observation that hunter-gatherer groups around the world, as well as successful communities and intentional communes, seem to keep their size between 100 and 150 people. Yeah, Dunbar's number. The theory is that the human brain is best equipped to navigate webs of personal relationships of up to 150, maintaining intimate relationships, remembering names and social status, and establish codes of conduct and communication. All this takes up mental space. Just as other primates tend to live in groups to up to a certain size, human beings are probably best suited to keep up with a certain number of companions. All Gore factories keep their size below 150 employees, so each plant can be entirely self managing, not just on the factory floor, but also introducing the people responsible for marketing, research, and other tasks. Um, I wonder if you'll get into this, but people have mentioned that the Dunbar's number is not as clear cut, right? It's there's a wide amount of range and variance there, and this is important because it's not like a hard limit of 150 people. It depends on like the types of relationships that you're upkeeping, depends on how the frequency, the environment, so on and so forth. This can range anywhere down from like 50 to all the way up to like 500 or even a couple thousand up to like 1500, right? Or 3000 or something crazy. And that's good to know because we can augment this number by using technology, right? We can augment this number by using better organization, um, methods, we can augment this number to be larger or smaller depending on the situation, on the goal that you want to establish, on all this other stuff in order to, better accomplish whatever we want to accomplish. And so, yeah, I got to look more into it, but it's definitely interesting. One more time, one more drink. I saw my water right there, so whoops. Skeptics often dismiss the anarchistic example of small scale primitive societies by arguing that it's no longer possible to organize on such a small scale given the huge population. That's what we basically do already. Like, if you think about it, there's no organization where you're literally dealing with thousands of people at a time. Even the big organizations, you're not dealing with all those people. It's always fractalized, right? You're only dealing with a small subset of those people. And the problem is the pretense that everybody's involved. Everybody's not really involved in every decision or every part of the company or every part of the organization. It depends on the different aspects of what's actually being decided at any one point. Anyways, um, but there is nothing to stop a large society for organizing itself into many smaller units. Exactly. Small scale organization is eminently possible, even within a high tech industry, especially with the high tech industry. Gore factories can coordinate with one another and with suppliers and consumers while maintaining their small scale organizational structure. Just as each unit is capable of organizing its internal relations, each is capable of organizing its external relations. Oh, excuse me. I agree, definitely. Of course, the examples of a factory producing successfully within capitalist system leaves much to be desired. Most anarchists would sooner see all factories burned to the ground than anti-authoritarian forms of organization used to sugarcoat capitalism. Yeah. But this example should at least demonstrate that even within a large and complex society, self-organization works. Self-organization is like the whole point, right? That is what we're doing here. That's what every life form does, is self-organize. The question is not whether or not it self-organizes. The question is how, right? And our hierarchical structure is a really poor method of self-organizing because once again, it tries to strip away the power to organize so that only a few people have the ability to think about that and to apply that and to have the authority to decide how people should organize, rather than for each person deciding how they should organize with other people. Like, look at the human body. People love to say, "Oh, the brain is in charge of things." No, no, the brain is not in charge of anything, right? It's the entire body is a self-organizing system in which every single cell and thing in your body is interacting with each other in different ways, and fairly simple ways. But when it all comes together in this interactive thing, it becomes incredibly complicated and complex. And the brain doesn't tell the body what to do. All it does is it's like a switchboard. It manages the signals between the different cells or the different organs in the body and things like that. Just like your lungs might manage the air, your heart manages the blood, your kidneys manage the bacteria, or your stomach, and this that everything manages their own thing, right? And that's the beauty of self-organization, and that's what we're severely missing today. This is so again, it's so frustrating because, like, goodness, it's like the answer's right there. We just got to realize what the hell is going on here. The example of Gore is still problematic because the workers do not own the factory, and also because formal management could be reimposed at any time by the company owners. Anarchists theorize that the problems of capitalism do not exist only in the relationship between workers and owners, but also between workers and managers, and that as long as the manager-worker relationship persists, capitalism can re-emerge. This theory is certainly borne out by the Mondragon example, where over time managers gain more pay and power and renew the unequal private focus dynamics typical of capitalism. Right? Hierarchy. Power corrupts, as they say. Taking this into account, several anarchists have designed an outline for a participatory economy, or Paracon. Paracon? Though no one has yet had the opportunity to set up such an economy on any considerable scale. I'm gonna have to look into this. Among other things, Paracon emphasizes the importance of of empowering all workers by mixing tasks that are creative and rote, mental and manual, thus creating balanced job complexes that will prevent the emergence of a managerial class. Interesting. It's 2003. I'm gonna have to look this up. Oricon. There's a website for it. I'll look up the wiki too. Well, I'll look that up later. What the world? Okay, I don't know if this is the same thing. Maybe. Some random person stole the name or took the name and made a blog about it. I don't know. I have to look it up. Okay, where am I? During the rebellion in Oaxaca in 2006, people without prior experience organized themselves to run occupied radio and television stations. They were motivated by the social need for free means of communication. The March of Pots and Pans, the legendary Women's March on August 1st, 2006, culminated with thousands of women spontaneously taking over the state run television station. Inspired by the sudden sense of power they had won by rebelling against a traditionally patriarchal society, they took over Channel 9, which continuously slandered the social movements while claiming to be the channel of the people. Mm. At first, they made the engineers help them run the station, but soon they were learning how to do it themselves. One woman recounted, I went daily to the channel to stand guard and help out. The women were organized into different commissions: food, hygiene, production, and security. One thing I liked is that there were no individual leaders. For each task, there was a group of several women in charge. We learned everything from the beginning. I remember somebody asking who could use a computer. Then many of the younger girls stepped forward saying, me, I can. In Radio Universidad, they announced that we needed people with technical skills, and more people came to help. In the beginning, they were filming headless people, but the experience at Channel 9 showed us that where there's a will, there's a way. Things got done, and they got done well. In the short time, 3 weeks that Channel 9 was running, until Governor Ulysses commanded that the antennas be destroyed, we managed to spread a lot of information. Movies and documentaries were shown that you can never have imagined seeing on TV otherwise, about different social movements, about the student massacre and Tlatelolco in Mexico City in 1968, the massacres in August Blancas and Guerrero and Azotel and Chiapas about guerrilla movements in Cuba and El Salvador. At this time, Channel 9 wasn't just a women's channel anymore, it was the channel of all the people. The ones participating made their own programs as well. There was a youth program and a program where people from the indigenous communities participated. There was a program of denouncements where anyone could come and denounce how the government had treated them. A lot of people from different neighborhoods and communities wanted to participate. There was hardly enough airtime for all of them. This is why we have the internet today. We can make this even better. Um, 'Cause it's so interesting how even today with the internet, there's not really a great place for you to get all sorts of information that is both filtered while at the same time not like controlled, right? If you know what I mean. Like you say, like YouTube is not really the best place for that because of the algorithm, right? It gives you things that are based on what what can lead you down a rabbit hole that will be advertiser friendly. And when I say advertiser friendly, I don't mean things that are not um, uh, sensational. I mean things that are sensational, things that you know people with ads would want to put their stuff on and get people clicking and stuff like that. People who whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I mean, we understand that part, but the point is like even with YouTube, with all this amazing content on YouTube, it's inherently flawed, right? Kind of corrupted by this algorithm, advertiser ran algorithm. Like even if it gives you great information, you're often kind of led down a rabbit hole. You're led down a certain path so that when you find some information, it kind of blocks you from seeing other information that will also be kind of beneficial to you. So we need better platforms out there that are more open, that are more um, filterable. We can actually, I'm not sure if people remember, but I'm not sure if I remember, but I think there were filters on YouTube before, right? Were you able to easily kind of see the different types of content and different tags are actually like useful and things like that. Like today is not really done like that. Pretty much the only way for you to find something is to, hear it from somebody else, to see it, to search it directly or to have the algorithm recommend it to you. So it's kind of difficult. Anyways, after the occupied television station was taken off the air, the movement responded by occupying all 11 commercial radio stations in Oaxaca. The homogeneity of commercial radio was replaced by myriad voices: a radio station for university students, one for women's groups, one radio station occupied by the anarchists from a punk squad, and there were more indigenous voices on the radio than ever before. Within a short time, people in the movement decided to return most of the radio stations to their self-styled owners, but kept control of two of them. Their goal was not to suppress the voices that opposed them, as artificial as commercial voices are, but to win themselves the means to communicate. The remaining radio stations operated successfully for months until government repression shut them down. One university student involved in taking over, running, and defending the radio station said, "After the takeover, I read an article that said that the intellectual and material authors of the takeovers of the radios weren't Oaxacan, that they came from somewhere else, and that they received very specialized support. It said that it would have been impossible for anyone without previous training to operate the radios in such a short amount of time because the equipment is too sophisticated for just anyone to use." They were wrong. Ain't that something, right? The biggest thing is that, oh, this is a short section. I'm not gonna read it. I'm gonna read it with the next section probably. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of these technical skills and things like that, right? We like to say, oh, only certain people can understand this stuff or learn it or do it. But in reality, we just don't really do much to make it easy for people to care about doing it, like of to show people like how like the potential for its use or how it's directly applicable to their lives, to their daily lives and things like that. And because of that, only people who really have the time or the general um, uh, like passion for it can stick with something long enough for it to become something that's important. Like for instance, with coding, like a lot of people who got into it not because they thought it was going to be, they can make a good job out of it, but they just thought it was cool. Like they wanted to make games or they wanted to, make some website or something like that. And eventually it came to a point where, they were able to make jobs to get high paying jobs and all that other stuff. But for many people, even to this day, right, coding is completely inapplicable to their lives. Like they don't see how they would use coding in their daily lives, and so they don't bother to learn it. Right? You see the same thing with games. People still to this day, people still think that games are just, oh, there's just some thing kids do is kind of useless. You can't make a living making games. While on the other hand, you have millionaires, even billionaires, who all they do is just play games. Right? Not even including all the people who make games, the people who review games, or the people who design games. Or that's like we have to make it easier and more practical for people to get into these different subjects and areas, and we have to also kind of show people not that's kind of a capitalistic way of saying. I was going to say show people the value. In reality, the value is made up, right? The value is whatever we think it is. We have to show people instead what value even means, right? And specifically what value means beyond simple profit or money making, but how they can use any skill, technical or manual or otherwise, in their daily life to improve their lifestyle, to improve their livelihood, to communicate with others, to create communities and organizations and things like that. We have to do more of that. But yeah, that's it for me for today. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as they say. Subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks for coming. So yeah, have a great day. See ya. Bye bye.